Greetings, this is Mike Cornwell, the founder of Dixie Fruits, and this is episode 2 in our web video series. And this one is all about pruning. Now, pruning, why do it? Well, pruning is the key to density, and density is the key to output. This is exactly how you'll be able to get the most amount of food where you live. In this video, we're going to show you why to prune, how to do it, and what the results are when you're finished. Even though some of these cuts may seem extreme, when you leave this video, you'll be able to do it with confidence and without any fear of pruning. This pear right here definitely needs to be pruned. I've already kind of topped it a couple months back to get some of the top growth off. But you can see this is a pretty typical tree that you might buy at a nursery. It's about 5 foot tall. It was probably about 6 or 7 foot. And you'll see that all the branching, it occurs right here. So if you were to get any fruit off of these limbs, you're going to have to pick. It starts right here, and the larger it gets, the higher up this fruit goes. So this is like a perfect candidate for pruning. And what we do is we prune them about knee high. That way, when the new branches come out, they'll come out much lower, and they'll be able to, this will be much more the top branching, and you'd be able to pick in this entire section here. What we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the 2 tools that you use in pruning. The first one is a hand pruner, also known as a cicator to the British. And this particular one is a Baco set. And it's kind of this ergonomic model that has this little twisty thing. You don't need to get one of these that has this, but this is the primary thing that you'll need for doing pruning. And everybody needs to get a set. I recommend getting the most expensive one that you can reasonably afford. Good tools definitely make work a lot simpler. This other one, it is a lopper. This is for taking out the biggest pieces of wood. Sometimes, whether you got these bushes that need to be cut back, or you just bought a very large tree that you need to kind of break down to size, this is the way to do it. In this particular model, it's a Fisker one. I think we got it at a box store, and it has served us extremely well. Highly recommend getting a nice lopper set. So we're going to demonstrate the 2 different types of tools, and this pear that we cut earlier, you can quickly see that if all you had was a pruner, you bought this tree at the store and you're going to try to break it down and produce much better branching. If you were to try to use these pruners, I can't even get the wood very much around it. And if you try to get in there, it only gets in there at the tips. You're going to be squeezing like crazy. That's what the loppers are for. All you got to do is come in here. Very easy. It's very relaxing on your body, and you're not really struggling with your wrist. Everything else that's much smaller wood, this is what you want. But anything big, 1 inch larger, you really need to use the loppers. This tree here is a horse apple tree. As you can see, it's already over 6 foot tall, and it's fairly close to the house. It's about 5 feet from the other apples that it's next to. And you can see something like this is already going to grow really large. The buds, when I take a look at it, they're very tight. They're not going to be popping out more than likely much lower than here. And with all this tight, dense branching or buds up top, that's how we know that this thing is going to be very top heavy. So if we want to be able to pick these apples, there's only one thing we can do, and that's prune it. I bring this particular tree up for a very important point. Long before I started actually pruning this intensively, it felt very uncomfortable to be able to get in here and actually do the pruning on something like this. This is not uncommon for something for you to buy and plant, and you're going to feel very pressed to just kind of leave it like it is. And imagine maybe it has some branchings when you plant it. you're really going to not want to cut it because you're going to be afraid to lose all these branchings. Well, I'm here to tell you, after you make the right cuts and you do it enough times, you eventually just don't have that fear anymore. And if there's one thing I can impart to you on this video, is basically the courage to know that by doing this pruning, you're not going to mess the tree up. And if anything, you're going to be setting yourself up for success. Now, having said this, if you're trying to create a very large tree that produces thousands upon thousands upon thousands of apples, this is not what you want to do. But if you want to put many trees in your backyard, very densely close, so you can pick a couple hundred maybe, this is exactly what you need to do. And just know that you can do it. And so I'm going to do this on this video, and I assure you, I have no anxiety about doing this. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to take a look where my kneecap is. That's where I like my branching to be. I see there's already conveniently a bud kind of popping out. I'm going to encourage this bud. Done. And now that we've done that, this will heal over the top. And since we've done this cut, we're going to see all these buds start to pop out. We just told and highly encourage this plant that in order to grow, once it comes out of dormancy, it's going to pull the energy out of its roots, and it's going to no longer have this spot to be able to come out of. And so it's going to have to come out these buds. So we can, because this one has buds on it that we can see, we can fairly predictably determine that it's going to send out shoots this way, it's going to send out shoots that way. And so once this starts to come in, we just want to make sure that some of this lower growth is kept in check, but the branches that pop out here and then make a nice scaffold structure, those are the ones we're going to keep. And it's just that simple. We're going to go take a look at these 3 apple trees that I've pruned at 3 different sizes. When you take a look at them, you'll see the main thing that I really want you to take a look at is where the branching begins. Because where this branching begins, you got to realize is where the fruiting wood starts. So if the branches start up real high, you're going to have to pick them, you're going to have to pick all the fruit really high up. But if it starts real low, it might be difficult to maintain under. So these 3 trees right here are all apple trees. And you'll notice that each one where the branching begins, this is actually where we top them. And so this one is our tallest one. I believe when we cut this, there were already branches established here, so we wanted to maintain them. And so you can see it's much taller than some of the other trees. This is the size that we believe is about right size. And for me, it's about the knee high. And so we cut that. There was no branching on it, and it sent out new branches. And lastly, this other one, which is even lower than that, you can see my knee's about right here. It's about six inches down. This one is pretty low, but it is still, as you can see, this is definitely a doable size. Let's take a look at this larger one real quick, because it brings up a good point. I've talked a couple times in this video about the importance of just doing kind of the right thing and, you know, trusting the fact that while some of these cuts might be kind of difficult, they're worth it in the long run. And with this tree, we were hesitant about cutting it, so we ended up, you know, just leaving the nice branches that were there. And one thing that you'll see is all of this is never going to fruit. So this height right here will have no fruiting wood, and so it might begin right here. But if you really take a look at what's here, this is like some very, very tight budded wood that it's just not going to fruit. So that means from about, you know, about chest high and all the way down, there's going to be no fruit on this. It's all wasted space, and everything else that could potentially fruit on these apples is going up in the air. So some of these, you can see that when it actually starts fruiting, it's going to begin right here. This tree is not ideal, just based on the height alone. And the decision was made just because we were uncomfortable with cutting it a little bit lower and letting the branching come out naturally and shaping it from there. That doesn't happen anymore around here. You can see with this other one where we did it, all of this lower wood has the potential to fruit. And since that's the case, we can pick it kind of lower, but all of this wood that comes up here has the potential to fruit, especially these kind of clusters here, which is much easier to pick the fruit. And lastly, with this lower one, it's probably a tad on the low side. We could see some fruit happening down here, but we could potentially cut out some of that branching if need be in order to encourage more of the fruiting wood up a little higher. But depending on your situation, this may be a better height for you. I mean, you can see with them smaller, a little bit lower, turning into bushes, you can stack them right next to each other and get them in real tight. These trees, we could definitely get in even tighter than this. One of the things we're going to do is take a look at these plums that I've got about half done. They have already been topped when they were first planted. You can see them right here. Used to be 6 foot tall, topped at about knee high, maybe just a little bit lower. We then got in and we anchored the limbs down to make them quite horizontal. We've then gone in and we've cleaned out the inside of this. So when you can imagine in the summertime, when this thing's all leafed out, there's nothing here in the middle. So there's plenty of light penetration getting down and in there. And then we've also gone through at least one time and we've topped it in the summertime. And looking at it, it probably could use another topping about right here. Some of this long whippy wood, we're probably gonna head cut that back to encourage some more branching coming out. You gotta think that the more of these side branches, like you can see here, that come out, that's where all your flowering and fruiting wood is. So that's the kind of stuff that we want to encourage. Whereas this tall whippy growth, there's no flowers and fruit that are coming on this. Let's take a look at another one of these plums here. You can see that they're about 5 to 6 feet apart. This allows us to get in there real tight, but still having them close. They probably could even be a little bit closer. This one has a little bit more of an upright habit. And you can see similar things have happened. We've topped it, we cleaned out the insides of it, and we started pruning back the tops here. In the wintertime, we're not gonna do any of that kind of pruning. The only thing that we might be looking at doing is getting rid of some water shoots or some water sprouts. And we did one that was right here that was growing up. Any real tall growth that comes in the center, we wanna get rid of. While these have kind of popped up, you can see they've already got tons of flowers on them. We're gonna leave them. If any of these start to grow big, we'll start cutting them out in summertime. There are two types of pruning cuts. There's what's called a heading cut and a thinning cut. And they do two entirely different things, and depending on what you want to do is the way that you want to do it. I'm trying to make this as simple as possible, and I can show you exactly what happens when these cuts. So what you're looking at here, this is an elderberry. It is a native plant that many people haven't quite been so familiar with, but I want to draw you in on kind of 2 points. One, let's look at a new growth shoot. If you can kind of see it coming down and then coming up, it is one long whippy growth. So the way that this fruits is it fruits on the tips. So what will happen is once this grows out a little bit more, it'll put on this giant umbrella of flowers right there on the tip. Well, if you notice by looking at it, there's only really one tip of this branch. So we know that this thing is only going to put on one umbrella of flowers. Now over here, you'll see something a little different. This was a taller branch that we had gone in earlier in the year and pruned it back to a node. And what ended up happening is it forced the plant to put out other shoots. Each one of these shoots will put on its own set of flowers. And in this case, at least 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of flowers. So what a heading cut does is it encourages the branching of the plant. And this branching of the plant ends up making it more like a bush. So if you leave an elderberry as is without doing any pruning on it, it will very quickly grow to 12, 15, and even sometimes 20 foot tall. It'll have 1 or 2 kind of main stalks and it'll look like what we consider a tree. But you can see with this one, We've topped it a number of times, and it has lots of new endpoints for each one of them to be able to fruit off of. So how do you do heading cuts on a bush like this? Well, you could get in there and get real detailed and technical with it. I can't even remember whether or not we were technical with this. Since this thing fruits all the way at the top with these growths, we want to bring it down. So with this, I'm just going to come in and just start cutting. And since I'm cutting all this growth off, I'm doing the heading cut, which will force from here down to start really putting out new growth. So I'm just going to come in. I'm not even paying attention. I'm just cutting it. Yes, normally you're supposed to be cutting to an end node. Otherwise, you'll get some of the plant will die back, but it's just not that big a deal, especially when you're dealing with very hardy plants. So each one of these cuts is going to end up creating a more bush-like structure that has more fruit on it. And this one bush alone produced over 8 pounds of fruit of elderberry last year. That was enough to make elderberry tincture. It was enough to make elderberry wine. It was enough to make elderberry syrup. It was enough to make dried elderberry for tea. It was a lot of elderberry on one plant. If I had not done these heading cuts, we would not have had nearly that much, because it would not have enough fruiting surface to fruit on. So again, this heading cut, all it's really doing is we're encouraging it to be a little bit more branchy. Right now I'm cutting some of these little sprouts that are coming out the sides because we don't want them. And I'm cutting these a little bit closer. We'll talk about that in another video, or another section of the video. And all I'm doing is just coming in and cutting. I'm also cutting specifically so I'll be able to pick it. A bush that's 12, 15 foot tall is very difficult to pick from. And that's about it. I'll come back outside of this video and go ahead and finish topping it. And that'll be the end of this elderberry. You can see this took us, what, 20, 30 seconds, maybe 60 seconds to prune this whole thing. This is done. It's the middle of February. I might come back in here after all the next fruit and then top it again to just kind of keep the height check on it. But that's it. 8 plus pounds of fruit, 60 seconds of maintenance. We're done here. Have you ever wondered how to make your tree a little less bushy? You got some limbs that you don't really want? Well, what you need to do is called a thinning cut. It's very simple. We got this mulberry, and you can see, man, it's got a limb that's getting up there. This is one of the reasons why we bent all these limbs down, so that we can keep this thing much lower to the ground so we can pick it. If I'm not mistaken, this Pakistan mulberry is supposed to get up to 120 to 150 feet tall. I don't know about you, but I'm not climbing 100 feet up to get a mulberry. Now, you could certainly knock them loose and then go to the ground, but in this case, we've got a great thinning cut that we can do on here. And the purpose of a thinning cut is basically to make a type of cut that makes it so that the limb never comes back, or at least highly encourages the plant. You might want to choose another one. Well, it should be pretty obvious which one we're going to do here. So I'm going to get up here. And unlike a heading cut, the way that this works is you do the cut as close to a main section as possible. So if I wanted to make it bushy, I might climb up there and cut it. But since all I want to do is get rid of this one, I'm coming in there, and I'm cutting it out. And that's it. You want to make sure to leave just a little bit of the wood left so it can heal over nice and good. And and then we shouldn't really have any more issues from this. This tree most certainly is probably going to go and put some other ones up, but it really has kept the height in check, especially of this branch, which if you take a look at it, this is less than a year old growth, and there is absolutely no flowers on it. This thing was trying to get to the sky and create a gigantic tree. Well, we hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below, and stay tuned for the next video coming up.